Adventure in Pipeman on W4CY Radio.
Wake up, America! It's time for the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY.com, West Palm Beach's #1 internet radio station. Here's your host, the Pipeman.
Repeat the message again. The same old tactics, a new disease. Hang on my every word so you believe. I hold the key to unlock faith. Create your perfect world. My will be done above.
This is the Pipeman here on the Adventures of Pipeman W4CY Radio. Here with my next guest who has some badass new music coming out tomorrow, the 20th. It's like a birthday present for me because my birthday was last week. So let's welcome to the show, Justin from Warcurse. How are you?
Thank you, man. Good. Thank you for having me.
So my first question is, do you have a favorite guitar behind you?
No.
It's like asking favorite children, right?
Yeah. All my good guitars, I shouldn't say good. They're all good. My stage guitars, like the stuff I use, is actually at my rehearsal space. But I will say, like my bootleg, like makeshift Tom DeLonge Stratocaster right there, I was jamming on that a little bit. I got the new Blink-182 album a day early, so having a little fun. Very unmetal, but very fun.
I was just about to comment on that as somebody that's been around metal since the beginning and was around all the gatekeepers and used to be one of them because, you know, back in the 80s, you had to be like your friends wouldn't let you not be a gatekeeper. I absolutely love that you started this interview talking about that you got the Blink album because back in the day, that wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, I'm a Pose fan. I don't care. Let them grow tomatoes. That's all good.
Yeah, and you know, one thing that's why I bring it up that's cool about this new album coming out is that it's kind of like it's not more of the same of what you've had previously, and you guys kind of have this attitude of, you know, so if it, you know, it doesn't hold true to hardcore thrash metalheads, oh well. And I love that because you're an artist. You should not be boxed in. Nobody should tell you how to make your music. You make your music from inside and what you feel and what you want to do. And listen, you know, we go back to Metallica. I'm one of those old school. I went to the first Metallica show ever. So when Black came out, me and my friends were like protesting it, you know, and like, oh my God, your 25 hardcore fans are never going to listen to you again. You need to change back. And meanwhile, we're all back and they got millions of other people. And you and I probably wouldn't be sitting here today if it weren't for that Black album.
It's very true. I give that album a lot of credit for it. People can crap on it, but yeah, without it, I mean, most of your favorite bands wouldn't exist today, you know? That's exactly. Kind of the one that brought most of us to the dance, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
I loved that album as a kid. You know, I got into Metallica very early on. I was probably like 5 or 6 years old. My parents were into different styles of metal. Their friends were into metal, so I was kind of raised around it. And as much as, I mean, I think Ride the Lightning's probably their finest moment. But as much as I loved the other albums, there was just something about the production of the Black album. There's the songs, they've really just stood the test of time. You know, especially the B-sides on the album that no one talks about. You know, I just think that album gets a lot more shit than it should. It's an amazing album. So
yeah, and I gotta tell you, like I didn't like it then, but I like it now that it did bring mainstream people to metal. Because otherwise metal would have never survived. And now I go cover festivals where there's like 100,000 metalheads there. And it's like, that's awesome. Because we're like the coolest people. People think we're like something. It's funny, but like you go to a metal show, there are no outsiders. There's no bullshit. There's none of the other stuff that's going on out in the world that's just pissing us off or making us depressed. We're just one big family. And like, we're an example, I think, for the rest of the world. Personally.
Yeah. And to your point, you know, with pissing off some of the purists or whatever, you know, we never set out to be a thrash metal band. It's just that's what we wrote, you know. It's like if you hand
Right.
me a guitar and you say play me something, like inherently what will come off of my hands onto that guitar will be something that kind of sounds like our first two albums. You know, you're sitting in front of the backdrop of our first album, which was like a very thrash metal album. But you know, writing this album, it was a little more collaborative. And Blaine, who is our vocalist, Blaine is a phenomenal musician and just an amazing guitar player. And having him was really cool. You know, he contributed some riffs to this album, and I worked with him on vocals and just thinking about writing songs versus writing, you know, something that needed to check boxes. You know, I think that
Right.
thrash metal is kind of its own worst enemy in that it is like very rigid with what you're allowed to do before the purists, you know, get upset. You know. You're not allowed to talk about certain things. You can have clean vocals, but they can't be too clean. You can have heavy vocals, but they can't be too heavy. You know, where they start casting you off into their little side subgenres where you become like a power thrash band, or everybody gets all dorky with these subgenre labels. You know, honestly, we just wrote some songs, man. We just wrote some songs that we wanted to write that we liked, and you know, if people like them, hey, and if they don't, oh well.
You know, and to your point, today I hate like how there's so many subgenres and micro genres, and it does make a lot of bands like sound the same. I remember being a metalhead in the 80s and, you know, my dad saying, oh, it just all sounds the same. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. And now I listen to some bands nowadays, they almost use like an algebraic equation to write metal, and it does sound the same. Whereas, you know, thrash metal to me, because I'm an old school thrash metal head, shouldn't have rules like Anthrax, Megadeth, Metallica, Exodus, Slayer. They are completely all different bands. Like completely. So I don't even get where some of the purists, and I'm from the beginning of it, get their ideas. And I think that's what would bring metal down. I think artists like you that are just playing what they feel with their passion and experimenting. That's what metal was about, experimenting.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of great bands out there that are doing that. And I think that there's a lot of young thrash metal bands that are really, really good bands that don't sound the same. You know, I think that some of it comes down to lazy journalism. And I don't want to like point fingers, but you know, like you read album reviews, and the laziest thing that a reviewer can do is just immediately like throw another band name out there. Oh, it sounds like Testament. Oh, it sounds like Slayer. You know, that's what they do. But it's like, what about the song sounds like that to you? You know, if the vocals are in a certain kind of style, but they don't sound exactly like the guy, why do you even have to throw some old band's name out there? You know, I think you can look at young bands like what we're doing. We don't sound anything like, you know, Hatriot's a really good young band, you know, and they have their own thing. You know, the vocalist is the son of Zetro of Exodus, so he, you know, he can't help that he was born with a certain vocal cords. You know, he's gonna sound like his dad. You know, shit, my dad could probably pass for me on the phone, but you know, they don't sound anything like us. And there's a, you know, like young band called Tyrant that I'm a big fan of. We've toured with from Lansing, Michigan. They don't sound anything like either of us. You know, there's a lot of young bands that there's a diverse array of sounds out there. I think where things start to become maybe a little repetitive, to your point, is a lot of these guys, they all have their albums mixed and engineered by the same 3 or 4 guys, you know, so the sound becomes a little repetitive when they sample replace the drums and everybody has the same drum sounds on their album, and they reamp the guitars and they're all reamped with the same amp in the same studio with the same speaker cabinet and microphone. Yeah, it's kind of hard to not, you know, have a uniform sound. So we made it a point to break out of that, go to a totally different studio, shoot for a totally different sound, and Confession's the end result. So hope people enjoy it.
I love it. And, you know, I want to say something about what you said because it made me laugh, because I was just covering Bloodstock in August, and somebody says to me, oh, I'm in the press area, and they're like, oh man, there's this band playing right now. They sound just like Exodus. You should go check them out. And I just happened to not have an interview then. So I went over there, and they were really badass. These kids were kids. They were teenagers, just like when I was a teenager seeing Metallica as teenagers. But to your point, I didn't hear so much the Exodus. like I heard similarities, but if that person didn't say it to me, I wouldn't say, "Oh, they're Exodus," you
Yeah.
know. But now you start putting that thought into people's heads because it was another press person.
Hmm.
Then they're trying to make it sound like Exodus because that's what happened when I first walked over. I'm like trying to compare in my head instead of just listening to them.
Yeah.
And so you're spot on with that.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you can take it two ways, and I think I try to take it both ways. I find it annoying and I find it lazy, but at the same time, you got to understand, like, they're comparing you to some of your favorite bands. They're comparing you
Right.
to some of the greatest bands to do it. So it's also a compliment. It's not. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It just seems to me, if you want to say something about a young band, like, talk about that band. Don't talk about another band. Talk
Yeah.
about the band that's right in front of you and what they sound like and what they're doing, and maybe try to pay a little more attention, and maybe you'll find some nuances or some things they're doing that are a little different than the band you're gonna compare them to right off the bat. So
Yeah, and I'm listening to your new music, and I don't sit there and go, "Oh, they sound like this." They sound like my viewpoint is your music sounds like just badass metal. I don't even call it thrash metal because it's got thrash components, but it's got other components, and that's what I love nowadays is music can have like all these mixes into it of all the influences. So I'd rather not narrow a band down to a genre because that just puts an artist in a box.
well, as a musician, I sincerely appreciate that, and I appreciate the kind words. I think what that comes down to is we have a lot of influences as a band. I mean, you got
Yeah.
5 different dudes writing this stuff together, and all 5 of us listen to different stuff. I mean, I could go down the list and tell you what everyone's listening to, but I mean, Murphy's really into stoner metal, and he plays in like a pretty good stoner metal band, and Blaine's very into like modern metal. He got into metal much later than like James and some of the other guys, so he definitely has a more modern influence. And I guess I'm kind of the traditional thrash guy, but you blend it all together and everybody contributes parts. It's like, again, we didn't set out to like make a thrash metal album ever. It's just that's what we wrote. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
And see, I love that. And that's another difference between nowadays and the old days, because the old days all your friends had to listen to the exact same music you listened to. Like I'd rather be exposed to other music, and maybe I'll find another new favorite band. Like, funny as can be, I found this one band playing at Download when I was covering Download that I would have never gone to see, but like one of the other press people was like, "Come on, come with me. We're gonna go see this band." I'm like, "Okay." And they were badass, and they were so not typical of what I normally listen to.
mhm.
But now I'm like playing them on my phone all the time, and that's I think what people need, and that's what we have today is like, just because you're a metalhead doesn't mean you only have to listen to this type of metal or even just metal. Like you mentioned, the Stones are coming out with a new album. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with being a metalhead and listening to a new Stones album,
Hey man, yeah, if you can't get down with the Rolling Stones, my drummer actually he hates the Rolling Stones, but he's fucking wrong. He's wrong. Rolling Stones are awesome. So yeah, but that's the thing, it's like we're just fans of music, like Murphy and
Right.
myself, we've been in bands together for like 20 years now, crazy as it is, me and the other guitar player. And I mean, man, we've ran the gauntlet. We've played everything you can think of. I mean, we were in a band a long time ago that, kind of sound like Fall Out Boy. We've played in hardcore bands together. We've played in punk bands together. We've played in a ton of different bands together over the years while always listening to metal. So it was like, as funny as it was kind of the last thing we ever got around to doing was playing the music that brought us together in the first place. But our influences are just all over the place. And, if you allow some of that to seep in without going, crazy with it, I think you make something that's maybe just a little more interesting than trying to stick, very rigid to the rules and write something that sounds exactly like the one little box they want to put you in. So,
Yeah, and the way you wrote music for this album, to me, is kind of like if you take some of the best songs in history and the best albums in history, they were written the same way. It wasn't a formula. It wasn't, oh, it has to be like this. It was just a bunch of musicians that's what they were feeling and that's what they wanted to hear. So that's what they wrote.
Yep. I mean, you can hear on some of the songs, like I might have been in a better mood when I wrote a couple of the versus some of the other ones, Yeah, that's what it is. It's your emotions and it's your creativity. It's your feeling that day captured in into a computer or however you're writing your songs, captured into your cell phone or whatever. But those are just like little snapshots. Those are little moments in time in your life that you put down on paper or you put down, through a guitar into a recording, program. And hopefully they age well. That's the only thing you can hope for. That,
Nice.
You don't look back on it, 2 years later and wonder what the hell you were thinking. But yeah, I think
right.
we're pretty proud of the album that we wrote, and so far it's been received well. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
So I also read that like people are considering this like your Black album.
Oh, I hate that.
I know. And that's what I was going to ask you. How do you feel about that? And like, I would probably feel the same way as you. It's like, oh, it's just like what we were talking about comparing bands. Like,
Well, I addressed this earlier today. I'll address it again. I hate that so much because this is how that gets started. Okay. That's like record label talk. And that's like, that's like publicist talk. Those are the people that work for you on your team that just want to sell albums and they want to get as many people to open that email as possible and review it or check it out. So, what better bait to throw out there than the Black album, right? If you want to get somebody to pay attention to it. So we had nothing to do with that comparison. I don't buy into that comparison, but if that, again, it's almost like one of those kind of weird compliment sort of things. If somebody wants to draw the comparison, cool. That is the single most successful metal album in history and nothing will ever come close to topping it. So there are worse things to be compared to, but yeah, I don't hear that, man. I don't hear that at all.
And see, for me, it was different. Okay. Cause like if it said kill them all, then I would have opened the email, but Black didn't make me open the email. What made me open the email was listening to your music. Mm-hmm. And like, I clicked on like the newest music and then I wrote back, okay, let's set up this interview.
Cool.
Like I agree with you with that stuff. I'd rather listen to a band's music themselves and decide if I like it, because I can't interview bands I don't like. My job is to make you look good, and I'm not going to bullshit and say, oh, you're the greatest band ever when I think you suck.
Yeah. Well, so, I'm glad to hear that there's still some journalistic integrity in the world. But yeah, I sincerely do appreciate that. And I think that's the way it should be done. Let us, live and die, on our own merits here. I don't think I need to be compared to the Black album for people to listen to it. But if it helps, fuck it. Yeah, I guess they're just trying to sell albums, right? They're just trying to make me money. I shouldn't be mad about it, right? Just let them do it. Yeah.
So let's tell everybody how they connect to you guys on socials, on the web, how they check out the new album, buy your merch, all that good stuff.
All right. So first and foremost, the new album's called Confession. Comes out October 20th. I don't know when this airs, but that'll be tomorrow, Friday, October 20th on Metal Blade Records. You can find it pretty much anywhere music streamed or sold. But, go to your local record store and request a physical copy. Go buy that thing from a small independent guy. You can find us on all your usual platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We're terrible at Twitter, but we're on there. We've got a tour coming up if you want to come see us live. And that I think is where we thrive as a band. If you want to know what Warcurse is all about, come see us up close and personal, and we'll put on a hell of a show for you. We're going to be going out with a band called Armed for Apocalypse. That tour starts in Sacramento, and it's kind of like a West Coast into Canada run. That'll start November 1st, and information for that is also available on our social media or on our website.
Nice. And I can't believe in 2023, Armed for the Apocalypse is still appropriate. Like that was the whole theme back in the 80s. And I can't believe all these years later, we're still talking about that crap.
Yeah, maybe more relevant than ever, right?
I know, right? So, but man, everybody's got to check you guys out because you're badass.
Thank you.
And now after talking to you, I like you even more because you're real, and that's what counts in music, especially in metal. So thanks for giving us great music, and thanks for being on the Adventures of Pipeman.
Dude, thank you for having us. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY Radio.